Hey, y'all, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And this is normally the portion of the show where I tell you about how fun today's show is going to be. And I think we are going to have some fun today, but the real truth is instead of a fun show, this may be a little bit of a nervous show, a little bit of a tense show. I'm obviously very, very excited about tomorrow's game against Auburn, but the reality of just how big this one is for the Dogs is starting to set in. I think Georgia's going to win. I think it's going to be a battle all day long. We know what's at stake, and we're going to talk about it all right now. Plus, Jeff Sintel joins us, too. It's great to have you with us as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I briefly talked to our video audience before we start the podcast and audio portion of our show, and just a moment ago I told all of them that, a lot of times we have fun shows here, and hopefully today this is a fun show too, but maybe the adjective that sort of describes the emotion of today's show is not so much fun and happy as it is nervous and tense. Not because I think that Georgia's going to lose against Auburn on Saturday. I don't. I assume that Georgia's probably going to win this game the way they have all the other games thus far this season. I just think the magnitude of just how big this one is for Georgia is now sort of fully starting to set in. What's at stake here, and a rival opponent like Auburn. I just think the full weight of this is kind of coming down on us here a little bit at DawgNation Daily. What it reminds me of is a few years ago, this is actually many years ago now, I read a book one summer. You remember Tony La Russa was longtime manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, and it was that 3 Nights in August book. Buzz Bissinger wrote it. It was about just a pennant chase for the Cardinals and a big series against the Chicago Cubs back before the Cubs were very good, but it was just that kind of, here's what it's like to be in the heat of a baseball pennant race. And La Russa said something. I'm going to butcher the quote. I won't get it exactly right. But what he said then is exactly the way that I feel now, kind of moving into the stretch run for this college football season. And now all I'm doing is hosting a podcast. I'm not one of the coaches, one of the players, but we all know the feelings are real, even for people on kind of the outside of the discussion. What La Russa said about the tension of a pressure-packed sports moment is you can't eat, you can't sleep, you really can't do anything. And it's the way you want to feel all the time. And that's so true. A lot of Georgia fans wake up today after having not maybe slept much that last night. They're already thinking about what's going to happen on Saturday. If they are working today, they'll spend most of that time at work kind of thinking about what's going to go down at 3:30 Eastern time inside Jordan-Hare Stadium between Georgia and Auburn. It's the sort of fixation that could almost bring about some sort of anxiety and some pain and some suffering, but it's kind of the way that you always want to feel. I think a lot of DawgNation feels that way, kind of moving into the game against Auburn on Saturday. And for me, as you kind of think about in this sort of big moment for Georgia, this big rivalry game, what's it going to take to win this game? What's it going to take for Georgia to get a W against Auburn on Saturday? And for me, it sort of feels more of a game about the Georgia defense than the Georgia offense. I think at this point in time, the Georgia offense kind of is what it is, a group that's going to try to run the football and eventually have success at that. A quarterback, even though he's a freshman, Jake Fromm, a guy that I believe we all trust now. I think the Georgia offense, you sort of know what you're going to get. I think there's a little bit of mystery when it comes to the Georgia defense here, a group that's been great this season, but maybe a group that has a little bit of a surprise in store for Auburn on Saturday. Let me take a couple minutes to sort of set up why I think that might be the case. Let me start with Auburn running back Kerryon Johnson, a guy who's had really a sensational statistical year, a big-time touchdown producer, a guy that's finding the end zone, scoring points at a pretty record pace for Auburn. And this week, as you might imagine, Kirby Smart, when he looks in on Johnson, a guy who's had to carry the load for the Auburn offense, at least from the running game side, since the injury to Cameron Petway. Well, Kirby Smart likes a lot of what he sees in Kerryon Johnson. Here's Kirby.
Well, he's an explosive runner. He's very patient. He's got a vicious stiff arm. I mean, his stiff arm reminds me of the kid at Tennessee, John Kelly. He's really hard to tackle, and they do a tremendous job giving him the rock. He runs hard, and our guys didn't tackle the way they need to today, and I hate it because we got another day to clean it up, but he's a special back.
And I'm assuming cleaning up that tackling issue, whatever Kirby saw in practice, I'm sure Georgia finished the week by doing just that. But let me stay on Kerryon Johnson for a moment because he is a good running back, having a great season. But one of the guys that works with us, one of our writers, Connor Riley, was saying something yesterday in our work area, and I kind of overheard it, and it sort of made an impression on me. And I think it has a factor in kind of how this game's going to be decided on Saturday. As good as Kerryon Johnson, the running back for Auburn's been this season, he's actually been inferior to the Georgia running backs in one pretty important metric, and that's yards per carry. You look at the Georgia running backs, I'm looking at CFBstats.com right here. Sony Michel, second in the SEC at 7.89 yards per carry. DeAndre Swift, third in the SEC at 7.61 yards per carry. Elijah Holyfield, fourth in the SEC at 7.09 yards per carry. Nick Chubb, ninth in the SEC at over 6 yards a carry. You have to get all the way down to 19th in the SEC to find Kerryon Johnson in that number. He's just 5.23 yards per carry on the season. I think that's kind of an interesting comparison to Johnson, maybe a little less explosive than the Georgia running backs. Doesn't mean that he's not good. Doesn't mean that he's not a dangerous player on Saturday, but maybe just a little bit less explosive than the Georgia running backs. So I think the Georgia defense, that's been great against the run all season long, I think they will be as advertised again on Saturday, and also terrific at the Auburn running game, even if it's a better running back and a better ground attack overall than Georgia's seen for most of the season. So really the real issue for the game on Saturday then shifts to quarterback Jarrett Stidham. And this is where the potential surprise comes in. Can Georgia defensively do something to disrupt Stidham on Saturday? Well, when Chip Towers was on DawgNation Daily earlier this week, he seemed to think the answer to that might be yes. He seemed to think there might be a surprise coming for Auburn this weekend, and that Georgia, which has been content to mostly not blitz for most of this year, maybe it dials up a few more blitzes on Saturday. Here's how Chip Towers said it when he joined us on Monday.
I got to be honest with you. I think Mel Tucker is heading over to the Plains with some stuff in his back pocket. We hadn't seen him really bringing the house and doing a whole lot of risk-taking right now. I suspect you'll see a little bit more of that at Auburn.
I think a lot of Georgia fans, that's music to their ears. That's what they want to hear. They want the idea of Georgia being more aggressive defensively. Even if the results in terms of total points allowed and yards allowed have been great, even if Georgia continues to be dominant in the running game, I think there's an element of Georgia fans that sort of hope for a bit of dialed-up pressure against Auburn on Saturday. For what it's worth, though, Seth Emberson, when he joined us on Thursday, did kind of sound a little bit different tone in terms of what might go on here. He expects a little more, but maybe not as much as some fans want. Here's Seth.
I would bet you'll see a little bit more in blitzes, but they'll pick their spots and they won't do it very much because this is what they do. They rush 3 or 4, tend to rush 4, which when you have as good a defensive line as you do, makes sense because if you can still push the pocket with 4, you're creating a numbers advantage in the back.
That's obviously true, and that's the luxury that all defenses would like to be able to enjoy. But what if that formula's not working on Saturday? What if Stidham is having some success? What if he feels comfortable in the pocket? At that point in time, maybe it's time to change things up, especially when you think about something that Mike Johnson, my partner on AT&T SEC Country Live, said yesterday afternoon, that if you look at the games in which Auburn's won and the games in which Auburn's lost, there are two pretty stark differences, or a single stark difference that kind of stands out in those scenarios. Here's what Mike Johnson said about this subject on AT&T SEC Country Live yesterday.
I think when you look at the completion percentages, 54% against Clemson, 35% against LSU. And that kind of tells you the tale of what's been going on this year. When he has played bad passing defenses, you know, number 119 ranked, 104th ranked, 94th ranked, 97th ranked, Missouri, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, all those teams. When he has played those teams, he's looked great. That's what's really inflated his numbers. But when he has played good passing defenses, I don't think he's quite risen to the occasion. Not just yet. And it's not to say that he can't do it. But what you're going to find this weekend is Georgia is the number 8th ranked team in passing defense. Now, Georgia has to be able to rush the passer. I think that's a concern when you look at them rushing 4. I wouldn't be surprised if Kirby Smart does decide to dial up some more blitzes this weekend, try to get in Jarrett Stidham's face, because obviously the teams that have been able to rush the passer are the ones that have caused them problems.
This is one of those moments where I'm sort of glad that I'm not Mel Tucker or Kirby Smart, the folks who have the decision to make here about do you dial up more blitzes, because, I mean, I'll grant you, pressuring Stidham more does open yourself up to more risks. Does it open you up to more outside runs, which I think is a key for Georgia to avoid on Saturday, not allowing Johnson to become a more explosive running back than he's been thus far this season. It also potentially opens up more man coverage for receivers. The Auburn receivers can be a load to deal with. There's a risk associated with blitzing more, but when Mike Johnson says what he says there, he sort of convinces me that it may be the right decision for Georgia to make on Saturday, to show some things on film that the Dogs haven't shown a whole lot this season and give Stidham during the game more to think about. He was hurried and pressured against Clemson, and the Auburn offense did not look good. In the second half against LSU, the same thing was kind of true, and Auburn probably got very conservative there at that time. I think that's one of the chess matches that could decide this game on Saturday. But one thing is true, no matter what Georgia decides to do on this front, what I said to start the show is also true as well. This is one of those Fridays that Dog fans are going to have this game on their mind all day long. I won't lie to you. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little tense about this thing. Not because I think Georgia's going to lose, but just because I realize how big this game is for the Dogs as they continue to chase down that championship. More than just an SEC championship, potentially. A spot in the college football playoff. But the road towards that goes through Auburn this weekend. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us. Of course, we're on video every morning on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. Glad to have you watching us. If you're watching us right now, we'll have questions and comments with you coming up a little bit later on. We're on the radio at noon every day on Athens. Sports Radio 960 The Ref. And don't you know the Classic City is loving it this time of year with undefeated Georgia ranked as the #1 team in the country. They're having a blast in Athens about all of that. And, of course, in podcast form, wherever podcasts are found, iTunes, SoundCloud. We'll post the show for you at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just thanks for finding DawgNation Daily, no matter how you found us. And if you were with us last night, the Marlows in Roswell for our big event there, really appreciate that. What a great time that was. Special thanks as well to four-star linebacker, 2019 UGA commit J.D. Bertrand for being with us. If you were there or you watched the show on Facebook Live, you know that J.D. is a great future Dog. What a bright, intelligent young man that is. Also terrific on the football field as well. Good luck to him, by the way, tonight as Blessed Trinity takes on Oconee County in the playoffs. But a great chance to kind of hang out with J.D. Bertrand last night. That's one of the reasons why you want to come to one of our Marlows broadcasts, because you never know what's going to happen. I'll also tell you here very quick that we're going to be another big event coming up this week. We're going to be Wednesday night at Kroger, the Kroger Lindbergh, the Kroger Marketplace there in Lindbergh, for our Own the East celebration. And this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot like the broadcast we did at the beginning of the year. We'll show you the address on the screen so you can see this. But our Own the East celebration comes up this Wednesday at the Kroger Lindbergh. That's Wednesday, November 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. Kroger Marketplace, Lindbergh, 2452 Morosco Way, Northeast Atlanta, Georgia. That's 2452 Morosco Way, Northeast Atlanta, Georgia, for those of you who are listening to the audio version of the show. Jeff and I are going to be doing a broadcast. We'll do an off-air Q&A. It'll be a lot like we did at the beginning of the season. And while supplies last, we're going to have some more Own the East t-shirts to give away in person there at the Kroger Marketplace this Wednesday. So be there for that as we talk about Georgia football and the chase toward a championship and giving out some Own the East t-shirts. Now, of course, I'm going to continue to do that here on DawgNation Daily as well. Congratulations to today's winner. Xavier Cottle is the winner of an Own the East t-shirt, and all you've got to do if you want to win one as well, I sent out a tweet before the video show starts at 10 a.m., and then after the audio is posted, sometime around the noon hour, please just retweet that tweet. We collect all the retweets, and someone on our staff draws a name each and every day. And we're going to, while supplies last, while we still have these to give away, we're going to give away an Own the East t-shirt each and every day. We're doing this totally for free. Our way of just saying thanks for your support of DawgNation and to celebrate what has been a great year already for Georgia, owning the East here in 2017. Just like we predicted they would before the start of the season. We've got Jeff Sintel coming up in a moment. A lot to get into on the recruiting front with him. I'm going to grill him on a number of issues today. But I wanted to spend a moment before doing that, just kind of reflecting on just how big this game is for Georgia on Saturday, not just in terms of what the implications are for the college football playoff, but the history of this game. And specifically, let me let you hear from Kirby Smart on this from earlier in the week, who, sometimes it's almost like he doesn't want to sort of weigh in on the magnitude of that, of how big that is. But clearly he's played some big games here before, whether it was a coach in the Kick 6 game, the 96 overtime game against Auburn. Well, he was kind of asked to weigh in on that this week. And as you might imagine, he's focused more on what's going to happen this Saturday. Here's Kirby.
Every stadium that I've coached in, I feel like I have unique memories. There's lots of memories. I don't know that Jordan-Hare has any more memories for me than anywhere else that I've played. It just seems that I've played in there a lot because it's the overlap between playing here and coaching where I used to coach. So it has a lot to do with it. But there's nothing that really sticks out. I don't really remember playing real well. I remember Bobo's throw to get us into overtime, and then the Kick 6. Obviously, all I remember is the Kick 6. So that haunts you forever. But that's really it.
So that's exactly where you want Kirby Smart's head to be heading to this game on Saturday, not thinking about a game he may have lost when he was an assistant at Alabama or a game he may have won back in 1996. He's got a game to play in 2017. But here on DawgNation Daily, from time to time, we do reflect back on the past, and we do think about the moments in a rivalry like this that have led us to where we are today, because it's one of the things that impacts us so much as fans. And as a way of getting excited about this upcoming Saturday's game, let me share something with you from the UGA Vault. Our buddies there who do a great job kind of chronicling the history of Georgia football, including an outstanding moment from the 1982 game. Larry Munson on the call. Red Coat Band provides musical support. This will get you fired up for Saturday. Take a look.
Oh, I'm asking a lot, you guys, but hunker it down one more time. Auburn up to the line on the 21. Man split left. 2 men wide right and a man in the slot to the right. Dogs are in a 4. And Campbell, as they blitz on him, he threw a high, wobbly pass. They fight in the end zone. And the Dogs broke it up. They broke it up. They broke it up. Ronnie Harris and Jeff Sanchez got up in the air. Oh, look at the sugar falling out of the sky. Look at the sugar falling out of the sky. And now everybody's roaring 3, 2, 1.
Boy, if that doesn't get you ready to play some football on Saturday, I don't know what will. If you're listening to the audio version, how about that Munson call? I know you love that. On video, you got to see the performance by the UGA defense. An awesome, awesome moment. And you can get a free download of the UGA Vault for more highlights like that at the App Store or at Google Play, or you can check out get.ugavault.com. UGA Vault, great friends of ours here at DawgNation Daily, and make sure you check out more of the UGA Vault for more of that. For now, though, it's Jeff Sintel. Great to have you with us on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, Jeff Sintel, as you join us in the program, the people who are listening and watching us and have been with us since the beginning of the show, got a chance to hear a moment ago from the 1982 Georgia-Auburn game, the great call from Larry Munson, the terrific win that preserved an SEC championship for Georgia there at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and I would dare say our audience is ready to go and play some football. What do you say we just head to Auburn right now, Jeff? Does that sound like a good idea?
All right, Brandon, let's get a big truck. I think it's going to be a Hummer, maybe one of those recreational vehicles everybody likes. And I think we'll probably at least say the name Dale Carver in reference to that game as well.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And, you know, one of the things I hear from people every single weekend is, and I'm so grateful for this, people will kind of save some episodes of our show and they'll kind of listen to it on the way to the game. I know a lot of folks may be actually hearing the audio version of this show as they're driving to Auburn on a Saturday. So what do you say we give them some recruiting talk to keep them company while they do that? And let me start with something that happened last night. How impressed were you once again with J.D. Bertrand, the four-star linebacker from Blessed Trinity, the 2019 UGA commit, who joined us at our Marlowe's in Roswell? You know, that's my first time talking to him in a one-on-one situation, and I know the Georgia fans who were there, I feel the same way. I know you've known him for a while. What an impressive young man that is, and it really speaks to, Jeff, what I think is not just a quality brand of football player that Georgia's bringing into its recruiting classes right now, but these are pretty special young men, and that character, I think, does help you win games, and clearly Bertrand an example of a high-caliber class of character, to use an alliteration, that the Georgia recruits seem to have right now.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Brandon. I think maybe the thing there that stands out is they're just good boys, good guys. I mean, they're football players, obviously, but if you were a business owner and one of these kids, one of these young men came up to you and wanted to work for you during the summer or wanted an internship when they're in college, they're going to come across as great communicators, very, very genuine people, and just overall really nice guys. I think that's one of the things that JD brings to the table. I'm going to say this over and over because I think it's just a great example for a young person. He is an Eagle Scout. It takes about 5 years of a commitment to do that, and yet when you watch him on the football field, you're going to think about the words butkus. You're going to think about the words nasty, physical, savage. He's that type of guy for Georgia. And that's pretty good for the 2019 class because I've been told that it looks like Georgia will take at least 2 or 3 inside linebackers in 2019. That's the way the board sets up there. Of course, that's a little bit of a tell for the 2018 board because Georgia will look in other areas for that. But, man, if you guys want to talk all the recruiting talk right now for Georgia to help a road trip, I think Georgia fans maybe need to be pointing those RVs towards Pasadena or something like that, or New Orleans, because that is a lot to talk about right now. Lots of things going on with UGA recruiting.
No doubt about it. Let me talk to you about another linebacker here for a moment. That's Channing Tindall, and I thought you got some great quotes from him at DawgNation.com this week. That's obviously a guy that a lot of Dawg fans have targeted that 2018 class. I guess, to be completely honest, I was a little disappointed to hear him say he's a February decision instead of a December decision. And the thing I'm curious about here is that the kind of thing that, schools like Georgia would not only recruit him to choose them, but recruit him to choose them in December? Or are they okay with waiting to February on a guy like Tindall?
Well, Tindall's kind of layered, though. He's going to make his decision by the end of 2017, and that's just a straight-up commitment, though. He's not going to sign early. He'll likely sign on the first Wednesday in February. And, that's different, and we're getting into the blog about that today, about the new wrinkles of the early signing period and what Georgia feels about that, how Georgia feels about that and looks at that. But Tindall's the guy. Sounds like he's down to Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia. Going to be pretty hard for Florida to get in that race right now, when they don't even have a standing head coach that's recruiting him and building up a relationship and everything else like that. Thought maybe some key takeaways of that stuff when he spoke to reporters at the All-American jersey ceremony for himself in Columbia. Of course, that kid lives in Columbia, South Carolina. Of course, the South Carolina Gamecocks have a really great shot at Channing Tindall. But I think Georgia has really caught up things, and I think Georgia's really accelerated in his mind over the last maybe 2 or 3 months, especially visits to the Mississippi State game and then the South Carolina game. He thought Georgia had a better scheme than South Carolina, and he also said, this is one I bet that perked up Brandon's ears, he grew up a Georgia fan as well. And if you start adding things together, a kid that grows up a Georgia fan and then sees where Georgia is at currently in the rankings, maybe the altitude and the arc of the program, that's going to be a very, very good presentation for Georgia to try and reel in a guy like Channing Tindall.
Yeah, I noticed exactly what you said, Jeff. I thought the same thing. And speaking of another recruit that's got some South Carolina ties, at least we think that he does. I've been operating on the assumption that he does, and that's Rick Sandage, the defensive tackle. Although he lives in North Carolina because of the family connection, including his mother, to South Carolina, he's been thought to be a South Carolina lean. I told you this last night at Marlowe's. I'm going to tell you again on the broadcast so everybody can hear it. I took your comments from Sandage as good news for Georgia this week. Now, I don't have the full, sort of pieces of the jigsaw puzzle here, but in terms of a guy that was thought not to be a Georgia lean, saying that he's undecided, which is essentially what he told you, I feel that that's good news for Georgia. And the fact that, Sandage was paying as much lip service, maybe even more so to the home state school, North Carolina, as he was to the legacy situation, South Carolina, I also take as good news, because if you're Georgia and you want to win this battle, you'd much rather recruit head-to-head against North Carolina, who's not getting top players, than South Carolina, who is at least capable of getting some of those top players. I know that it's complicated right now for Georgia defensive tackle because there's a lot of names being kind of kicked around there, but I took the comments from Sandage to you this week as good news for Georgia. Do you agree with that from a Georgia perspective?
Yeah, I just didn't, I just was a reporter there, Brandon. I'd kind of heard the chirps and the narrative about he's a South Carolina lean, he's a South Carolina guy. It looks like South Carolina is trending, and all the other schools are fading. So I just talked to him about it. He gave me some very clear, candid answers that indicates that he's really unsettled. I mean, if we're talking about using the magic 8 ball of recruiting here, I think Rick Sandage is shaking that thing, and he keeps coming up with an ask me again later. He's a guy, every time I've talked to him, I've spoken to him with interviews in May, June, July, August, and now November. He was always like, I need to see more. I got to see more. I'm just not sure yet. Funny story is, which kind of told me all that stuff was on the level, is he said his mom was on him like, okay, Rick, is it time? I really wish you'd just go ahead and commit now. And he was like, oh, Mom, that's all great and all good and all, but I just don't know what team I want to commit to yet. So Rick Sandage is a guy that's undecided, and I even asked him a question about where all this stuff is coming from, about him trending or leaning slightly to Carolina, and he took Carolina as a question about North Carolina and not South Carolina. So that itself in a nutshell right there just tells me that this is a kid that's, not trying to be ambiguous, not trying to parry a reporter's questions or anything else like that. He just doesn't know yet. And it's okay not to know that. I kind of wrote that story that way because I know everybody expects these interviews to be like cut and dry and pointed opinion here and pointed opinion there. But sometimes, Brandon, life's just not like that. And I think Rick Sandage recruiting is that case.
I also took it as good news that Justin Fields is one of those guys that's reaching out to him a lot. He described in detail to you just how frequently Fields is sort of commenting to him if he sees Sandage talking about, another school on Twitter. If you're a Georgia fan and you're looking to kind of, lean in and win with this big defensive tackle, having Fields running point on that, there are certainly worse scenarios that are available to you.
Yeah, I would imagine Brandon like that, like hearing about the quarterback, marquee nation's #1 overall recruit, putting in a little punch in the clock and putting in a little work for the G there on that one.
No doubt. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. How does Christian Barmore fit into this discussion? Another big defensive tackle, another young man from Pennsylvania. I mean, is Barmore, how high on the pecking order of potential defensive linemen does Barmore kind of come in here on?
Well, Rick told me something very interesting. He told me that he felt, from what he'd heard from the staff, that Georgia could take maybe 2 or 3 more defensive tackles in the class. And I know everybody's going to get their calculators out, fingers and toes, and try to figure out how in the world can Georgia, with potentially 6 public spots remaining, how can they shoehorn 2 or 3 other defensive tackles into the class? That's going to be pretty hard to do. But, if you're thinking about the 2 or 3 names or maybe the 4 names that might fill in those 2 or 3 guys, I think Rick Sandage is a guy. I think Jordan Davis out of Mallard Creek in Charlotte, North Carolina is a guy. I still think Robert Cooper is a guy for Georgia. If they're going to add 2 to 3, I think Robert Cooper's a guy whose name has to be in that conversation. And also Christian Barmore, because Christian is a guy who's recruiting really just exploded his senior year. He had a position change. He had some new coaches come in. They moved him to defensive tackle. He had been kind of moonlighting on the offensive line as well in his junior year. He got that new senior film out, and everybody started offering. Georgia is a finalist for Christian Barmore. Alabama is a finalist. I think Temple is still a finalist. I think with Christian, though, the fact that he's going to start taking his official visits after his season, he's going to do a lot of visiting in November and December and in January. That class just might fill up pretty fast for Georgia in terms of defensive tackles. If Georgia got yeses across the board from Rick Sandage, Robert Cooper, and Jordan Davis, and then there's some indecisiveness or some wait and see there with Christian Barmore, that might be counterproductive to his shot at joining the Georgia class in 2018.
And, Jeff, just a quick aside here, when you have these conversations, it's hard to believe and hard to wrap your mind around. A month from today, we'll essentially be knocking on the door of some of these guys becoming not Georgia commits anymore, but actually Georgia signees. This new timeline, man, it changes everything because Georgia's in the midst of competing for a championship, SEC championship game coming up. Georgia's punching its ticket for that. But then you roll right, from there, and you get into this moment where a lot of these guys are going to be signing letters of intent right after that. It is a real big change to the college football calendar, is it not?
No doubt. Just do the math simply there, Brandon. We're 40 days away from the December 20th signing date for the early signing period. And then if you back it up 5 more days, a huge day for Georgia would be December the 15th. That's when the name, who I feel is the top target left on the Georgia recruiting board. I think he's the biggest name potentially in the class whatsoever, and it felt that way since January. I think the name Jamari Sawyer goes right up there on the marquee with Justin Fields and Zamir White in terms of importance for the class of 2018 for the University of Georgia. And that means we're only 35 days away from the Jamari Sawyer decision.
Wow. So
lots of moving pieces for Georgia in this new early signing period stuff. And then I'm sure most fans are thinking about it. How does that affect, bowl practices? I know everybody's getting a little ahead of themselves there because Georgia actually has to win the remainder of its games, including that big game in Atlanta. But there are some potentially interesting conflicts with official visits and trying to get ready for that January 1st potential national semifinal should Georgia stay in the top 4, along with all this other new stuff. I know that the staff, I know Kirby Smart has said publicly he's kind of going to be in a wait-and-see mode, be very open-minded and see how everything plays out there.
It's one of the reasons I believe that the weaker programs wanted the early signing period more than the power programs did. Isaac Taylor-Stewart, defensive back, cornerback from San Diego, he tweets out that he's going to take an official visit to Georgia. How much attention is this worth paying towards?
Wow. Potentially. I think things won't heat up until he takes that official visit and sees whether he likes it or not. Now, that's slated, I believe that's slated for next weekend at this time for the Kentucky game. Isaac Taylor-Stewart's about 6'2", nation's number 4 cornerback, and he's a 4.37 guy, a 4.4 guy. He kind of holds the title belt, so to speak, Brandon, as the fastest player in the country for 2018. He won that there at the opening. He has that elite 6'2", 185-pound size, and I know people are thinking, come on, Jeff, Tyson Campbell, now number 3 cornerback, and now the number 4 cornerback, Isaac Taylor-Stewart. You just mentioned 2 or 3 defensive tackles. What's Jamari Sawyer going to do? Otis Reese, Channing Tindall. Goodness gracious! I mean, it is just a lot of thought bubbles up in the air right now for the Georgia Bulldogs in 2018. But I will say, to place it all in the right perspective, these are the right problems to have. Too many great players, not enough slots. Tough decisions about this 4-star, this top 5 guy, or this top 5 guy. These are places where Georgia football has never been in the modern world of college recruiting.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I don't want to play favorites here, but I do have to admit, from a storytelling standpoint, it'd be kind of cool to have Isaac Taylor-Stewart, the fastest player in the country, and let's say Daniel Fa'alelele, maybe the biggest player in the country. If you could sign the biggest guy in the country and the fastest guy in the country in the same class, that'd at least be doing something. Now, I'm not telling you Georgia ought to pick those 2 guys over some of the other potential targets that are out there, but that is kind of an interesting subplot that you might sign the biggest and you might sign the fastest.
Yeah, but again, Georgia's got to look at a project like Fa'alelele, and they're going to go I mean, very candidly, Brandon, I think if Georgia's really in the Cade Mays business and Georgia is really, got a big shot at Cade Mays, I think he would definitely win every sort of head-to-head priority with Daniel.
Without a doubt.
Big Daniel from down under in IMG Academy. But, if Cade Mays doesn't work out, Georgia might only sign 4 offensive linemen instead of 5, or they might dig deep down there and try to add Daniel Falele as well. So, again, Georgia, I think obviously there's 6 public spots left open for a class of 24, which is what I believe it's going to be. But there may be 9 to 10 names who I think Georgia would have a hard time turning down to fill those 6 spots right now.
That's exactly right. And I actually want to finish by talking to you about Cade Mays in just a moment. Before that, let me squeeze in one more. And we talked about this last night, but let me give this for the full audience here today as well. Jamar Chase, a player that at one point in time was rumored to be kind of, interested in Georgia, visiting Georgia. Florida decommits from Florida. This is a top 100 player in the country and a 4-star wide receiver. Georgia getting back in on Chase here, or is Georgia content to kind of go with the receivers that it has? Potentially even, I guess, Alante Taylor, who they're recruiting, who's possibly a receiver, possibly a defensive back. I mean, where do things stand with Georgia and Jamar Chase after his Florida decommitment?
Yeah, the connection there is Jamar Chase and Aaron Brule are high school teammates, so there's obviously a connection there. Do those 2 guys want to play together? I mean, Jamar Chase is a big-time receiver for 2018. I don't think he's better than Jaden Hazelwood, though, for 2019. And also you've got to look at Dominic Blaylock, who's committed there for 2019. And one thing to think about there is, Brandon, when you look at these spots, which will be at a premium, I think you also got to look at what Georgia could possibly bring in or already has committed in 2019 and kind of wonder if that's going to be a position of need. Yeah. I just think there are clearer needs. I mean, Chase is a big name. He's going to visit rah-rah. Georgia's going to have so many 4-stars and 5-stars again for the Kentucky game and senior night and all that. But to me, that recruiting board is so fluid right now that I think a 3rd wide receiver over a guy like Alante Taylor that could play both positions and multiple positions for Georgia. I think Jamar Chase is kind of like one of those things where you're looking at the ultra heated and cooled seats on the back row of your luxury sedan or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's really getting out into premium extra luxury options. I don't think Georgia, as talented as Jamar Chase is, I can't project any scenario where I have him in the class at receiver unless some decommitments happen at receiver the way things stand right now.
I think that's pretty sound analysis. You mentioned Cade Mays a moment ago. I wanted to finish with a discussion about Mays. Obviously, we know a big addition he'd be for the Georgia class. You wrote this week that you think there's some potential signs of good news there for Georgia. And, Jeff, I'm almost as equally fascinated by the good of Georgia for this as I am the bad of Tennessee. I mean, I just think this is just a absolute, punch in the nose to the Tennessee program. Butch Jones, even this week, had to kind of talk about some of the decommitments. He couldn't mention Mays by name, obviously, but even he had to sort of reference kind of what's going on there from a recruiting standpoint and kind of taking a defensive posture on that. I mean, isn't it true that getting Mays from Knoxville for all the things that you described on Tuesday, legacy, connections to the town, prominent family, I mean, this is almost just as bad for Tennessee as it would be good for Georgia, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Tennessee's doing there. I think the longer that they let this situation drift in the wind, whether it's not a Butch is our guy or a Butch is not our guy situation, there's thoughts out there that Tennessee's looking for that one master headline stroke where the dismissal of Butch Jones leads to a quick hiring for the next guy. That's one theory out there, but I just know this. The longer that this thing twists in the wind, Cade Mays will not be the only decommitment for Tennessee the way things look like going forward.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, Jeff, thanks for being with us in the program today. I'm looking forward to being with you in Auburn tomorrow. And for the folks that don't know, we're actually going to do our Dixie Vodka postgame show live from Auburn after the game tomorrow. Jeff, I hope we're talking about a UGA win, but one way or another, we'll be breaking it all down there at the Dixie Vodka postgame show from Auburn. It's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everybody will be looking for sugar falling from the sky at Jordan-Hare after that game, no matter what.
That's exactly right, Jeff. We will talk to you later.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Maybe some fermented sugar falling into some mouths if the game goes well for Georgia on Saturday. Good stuff from Jeff Sintel. As I said, looking forward to doing the Dixie Vodka post-game show from Auburn tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. And as we transition here, get ready to do our SEC Through, let me remind you the DawgNation Daily is brought to you in part today by my friends at MyBookie. You know, holiday time of the year coming up, a lot of parties, a lot of gifts, a lot of money going out of your pocket. You want to put some money back in your pocket, and that means this time of year, not only you got the holiday stuff going on, but you still got a lot of football. You got some basketball. You got some hockey. You got all that kind of stuff. You can play where the pros play at MyBookie. MyBookie.ag is the website, whether it be the over-under, the side, you want to bet the point spread, kind of whatever you want to do there. You can do all that with MyBookie.ag. But right now, for DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers, MyBookie's got an even better offer than that. You can get your first deposit matched up to 50%, but you got to use the promo code DawgNation. Use that promo code DawgNation, the website MyBookie.ag. Get your first deposit matched up to 50%. You play, you win, you get paid. It is that simple with MyBookie on the web at MyBookie.ag. Now, let's look at some of the games for this weekend, both in the SEC and the ones that impact where Georgia's ranked in the college football playoff as well. Let me fly through some of these SEC games at first. Arkansas, LSU on Saturday. I'm not quite sure if either of these two teams have a whole lot left to play for. This is a rivalry game. They play for that boot trophy, but Bielema is probably getting fired. LSU sort of let its season go down the drain last week against Alabama. You know, do you get much from them in this game beyond that? I'm not sure. Not quite what to expect from Arkansas, LSU on Saturday. It is an early start as well, which makes things even tougher. My guess, though, is in the SEC East that South Carolina is going to play well again. And with Florida coming in, this could be sort of another low point for the Gators this weekend. You know, you're talking about a Florida team that got blitzed and demolished by Missouri last week, and now this week going on to face its old coach, Will Muschamp, who's frankly found more success, I believe, at least in terms of a brighter future at South Carolina, what the Florida program currently has, not knowing who its coach is going to be next season. I look for South Carolina to win this game. I look for it to be another good moment for what I think is a pretty good team. We saw that in Athens last week. I thought South Carolina looked pretty good, and I think Muschamp's doing a good job there. I think he beats the Gators on Saturday, and another low point reach for Florida, and y'all know I'm enjoying every bit of that. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, I don't care much about one way or another. Kentucky helped Georgia out last week by losing to Ole Miss, but man, what a terrible loss that was for the Wildcats. They have certainly done better in recruiting under Mark Stoops, but do they have anything going on the field? Hard to find any evidence of that. Heard some talk this week that Alabama-Mississippi State might be a little closer on Saturday than the experts think. Not quite sure where that's coming from, given the fact that Mississippi State, when it's been challenged this year by Georgia, didn't meet that task. When it was challenged this year by Auburn, didn't meet that task. Got blown out both those games, but some people seem to think that Mississippi State might be good enough to kind of hang around with Alabama on Saturday. Mike Johnson yesterday on AT&T SEC Country Live did pick Alabama to cover the spread, though. I think this becomes an interesting measuring stick game for Alabama, that right now is ranked below Georgia, I believe with good reason, in the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's top 25. Can they go out and beat Mississippi State as badly as Georgia did? Georgia dominated that game in Athens. This game is going to be in Starkville, but can Alabama go out there and put a big number on Mississippi State the way that Georgia did earlier this season, the way that Auburn did earlier this season? I think for an Alabama team who's had some holes poked in its scheduling and its strength of schedule, its resume, I think a convincing win against number 16 Mississippi State might be the way to go there. Can you believe that Missouri is an 11-point favorite over Tennessee, by the way? What a disaster of a season this is for the Vols. Now, I know Missouri just beat Florida last week, but come on, let's not pretend like this is a good Missouri team all of a sudden. They can score some points. They do have good wide receivers. Drew Lock's a pretty accurate quarterback throwing the ball deep down the field, but this is a total indictment of Tennessee, and for all I know, I would assume that Missouri does probably win that game. Before we wrap up our SEC through, let me touch on some of these top national games here for a moment, because the College Football Playoff Selection Committee come out again with a new ranking on Tuesday. As far as the teams ranked below Georgia, here are the games this week. They're going to kind of determine some of that. You got Washington-Stanford tonight. That's a big game to pay attention to. Clemson-Florida State on Saturday. Clemson can win the division if it beats the Seminoles and kind of go into a sort of a win and you're in ACC championship game against Miami potentially. Iowa beat Ohio State last week, plays undefeated Wisconsin this week. That's a pretty good game. And then the two primetime games after Georgia-Auburn. I think Notre Dame-Miami is just going to be a blast. Now, I assume that Notre Dame's a lot better than Miami, but the truth is I thought Virginia Tech was a lot better than Miami.Maybe Rick's just got the magic formula right now. That'll be a fun game to watch. And then TCU-Oklahoma as well. And I am calling for the upset here. I don't know how big of a favorite TCU is. Michael Shalaba, how big of a favorite is Oklahoma here? About a touchdown? Oklahoma over TCU. He's going to check. I think they're about a touchdown favorite. I think TCU wins this game outright. I just think it's a better defense. And I think Oklahoma, as good as Baker Mayfield has been, I think the TCU defense probably gets that done, and will make that your SEC through. All right, so let me transition here for a moment. And I want to talk about Georgia-Auburn again before we're done. I want to play you a clip of what Kirby Smart said about Jake Fromm this week, and I think it really sets the stage for what Fromm's going to do tomorrow against Auburn. Before that, let me go back to something that Jeff Sintel and I were talking about a moment ago. We were talking about the disaster that is Tennessee right now, and Tennessee losing Cade Mays, the big offensive line prospect from Knoxville who decommits. I think a lot of people think he's going to Georgia. He may go to Clemson. A lot of people think he's going to Georgia. Well, this week, Butch Jones was kind of grilled about the current state of recruiting, and he said something, while not mentioning Mays by name. I was kind of bothered by this. Tell me if you're as bothered by this clip as I am. Here's Butch Jones.
Each individual has a different set of circumstances that they're looking for. And, you look at, instance, Trey Smith. Trey Smith wanted that challenge of helping us get Tennessee football back to a very, very high level. And he wanted that challenge. So I think each individual is different as well. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's forged on relationships over time. And it's ongoing and it's ever developing. And that's every program. That's not just Tennessee. That's the world of recruiting that we live in.
I mean, I don't want to read too much into this, but it almost sounds like right there he's saying that Cade Mays, while not mentioning by name, but that's the reason why he's asked the question this week, wasn't up for a challenge that Trey Smith, who is a very good offensive lineman, also from Knoxville, who Tennessee did sign and is having a great season this year, he's saying that Trey Smith was up for a challenge that Cade Mays is just not up for. Is that really the way to win a guy like that back? Is that really a way to make that family and that player feel good about Tennessee going forward? just another thing about Butch Jones. It just doesn't quite set well with you. I said on AT&T SEC Country Live yesterday that for me, Jones, while some people sort of treat him as sort of like a harmless goofball, the kind of guy that just sort of says corny cliches, but not really, just a harmless guy. There's an element of him to me that sort of feels a little bit different than that. That he's not the world's greatest guy, because it almost seems like he's taking a shot at Mays there, and there's some other things in the past there as well. So maybe I'm reading too much into that, but clearly Tennessee's in a bad way as Georgia gets ready to go to Knoxville and pluck Cade Mays potentially out of the capital city of the Vol Nation. All right, back to Georgia-Auburn here for a moment. And one of the real storylines on Saturday is Jake Fromm going back on the road again. And what some people say maybe a hostile environment for the first time in a while. Georgia hasn't played a lot of tough road games because Georgia's been emptying these stadiums. What's that atmosphere going to be like for Georgia this week? Well, Kirby Smart addressed that when discussing how much better a decision-maker Fromm's become during the season. Here's one more clip for Kirby Smart to close out the week.
From the beginning of the year, he's done well with decision-making. I think playing in the Notre Dame environment was really good for him because that was one of the tougher environments. Early in the Tennessee game was that way. But he continues to improve each day. And this will be another tough environment that he's got to make good decisions. He's got to execute the plan. He's got to be able to give the playmakers the ball. And as long as he does those things and makes good decisions, we're a pretty good football team because we can complement defense, special teams, and offense. But he's got to continue to do that.
Thought Seth Emerson wrote an interesting piece about this in his mailbag at DawgNation.com yesterday. It appeared on Thursday as I record this on a Friday. And he kind of talked about those home-road splits. The stats do speak for themselves that Fromm has been better in home games than he's been in road games. I think there's an asterisk to that, at least for me a little bit, in that the Notre Dame game, the first start ever for Fromm, came on the road against the best team Georgia's played up to this point in the season. I think what's more important for me from a statistical standpoint is the fact that Fromm has progressively gotten better throughout the year. Think about the Mississippi State game, which was a good defense. And, Fromm was better in that than he had been even in games against, like, say, Samford and Appalachian State because he'd grown and matured. My guess is, and I want to go on the record about this, I think Fromm has a good day tomorrow. I think that Fromm could make a big late throw that helps Georgia win the game, but I don't think he's rattled by the environment. I want to make sure I'm very clear with my opinion on that. All right, so I hope you enjoy the Georgia-Auburn game tomorrow, and I hope it's a big win for the Dogs. We'll look forward to talking about that next week here on DawgNation Daily, and let me take at least a brief moment to say, even though our attention's on the Deep South's oldest rivalry for this weekend, we're also still thinking about Georgia-Florida, too. Next October in Jacksonville, and 351 days from right now, Georgia goes back to Jacksonville, and we believe gets another win over the Florida Gators. It's our Gator Hater Countdown, 351 days from right now. By the way, we'll also next week continue to give away our Own the East t-shirts. If you want to be a part of that giveaway, the drawing for an Own the East t-shirt each and every day here on DawgNation Daily. I send out 2 tweets per day, a link to the video show just before 10 a.m. and a link to the audio show once it's recorded and posted just after the noon hour here on the Eastern Time Zone where I live. Retweet one of those. We'll draw your name for that. And, of course, we'll see you for the Dixie Vodka post-game show after the game in Auburn tomorrow. Y'all enjoy the game. We'll see you on Monday. And for those of you who are with us on video right now, look forward to talking to you. We got some time for some comments here. Hope you enjoyed the stuff on today's show. A lot of fun, as always. I certainly enjoyed the interaction we were able to have together. We'll hit some of these up. Nakia Hester gives us a dilly-dilly, courtesy of our friends. Is it Bud Light? Is that the beer commercial that does that? Funny line from Mickey Hand, who says, "Don't hold your breath for the Auburn PA announcer to tell us that Nick Chubb has passed Bo Jackson." Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good point. Mickey, my guess is you won't hear that. Charles Kaiser asked, "Hope you've washed that shirt a couple times this week." So to be truthful, I actually have more than one of these. But I also don't wear it all day long either. This is sort of like my uniform for the show. If you watch AT&T SEC Country Live, I change clothes before that. And it's also kind of cold here in Atlanta where I live today, or at least it was cold when I was coming to work this morning. So I generally sort of wear something else to work, throw this on for the show, and then change after the show for reasons that are probably too boring to describe to you. So, yes, this is not the only East t-shirt I have. I have worn it a few times this week, but I only wear it for the most part during the show. Michael Morrow says he's been to both Neyland and Jordan Hare. He thinks Neyland is louder. Fromm should be fine tomorrow. I've been to some loud games at Jordan-Hare, though. I think it is a tough environment, but I agree with Michael on his overall point that Fromm's probably going to be fine in the game. Sean Manzioni says, Gator hater. Sean, I appreciate that. William Bruno says, go Dogs. I appreciate that, too. John Arena says, where will we be for the Auburn game? We're making the trip. So do me a favor. If y'all are like tailgating, things like that, tweet us where you're going to be, and we'll try to walk around campus and see as many people as we can before the game. We don't have like an official, it's not like an official DawgNation invasion. We may have some more of those before the season's done. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But this is not an official DawgNation invasion tomorrow, so there's no sort of sanctioned event before the game. But if y'all are out and about, let us know where you're going to be, and Jeff and I'll try to find you. Scott Harris says he was in Memphis State on Kirby Drive. Hope that's a good sign for the game tomorrow, because I know a lot of Georgia fans hope Kirby is orchestrating a lot of those drives for the offense. Shane Guy says, see the Dogs, speaking of business trips, taking a business trip, coming back with a big convincing win. Boy, that'd be something, man. Steve Smith says, how do I get a T-shirt? So I tweet out a link at DawgNation Daily. That's my Twitter account, at DawgNation Daily. I tweet out a link to the video show before 10 a.m. and the audio show once it's posted after 12 p.m. Just retweet one of those, and we're drawing a name every day between now and whenever these shirts, kind of run out. Also, we're going to be at Kroger Marketplace in Lindbergh in the Atlanta area this Wednesday. If you live in the Atlanta area, we're going to give away some more shirts in person there that day, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I like what Will Go Dog says. He says, owning the East not good enough. UGA's heading the direction of owning the SEC. I think you're right about that, and I'll tell you a quick story. When we started the Own the East campaign, when I sort of had the idea for it, it was kind of a two-pronged idea. On the one hand, I will admit that I thought that the East was the reasonable goal for Georgia this season. I mean, to be truthful, I didn't think Georgia was probably going to win the SEC this season. I thought that might be maybe a bridge too far in Kirby Smart's second year, but I thought Georgia could and should win the division. So that's the first reason why I did the Own the East T-shirt and did that conversation this year. The second reason, though, was about not just this season, but in future years going forward. Now, I didn't want to make too big of a deal about that before the season began, because I wanted to focus on just the year at hand. But to me, Own the East is not a sort of present tense idea. It's also a future tense idea. That when I look at the resources that Georgia has at its disposal, the problems currently going on at Tennessee, the problems currently going on at Auburn, or I should say at Florida, when you see how Georgia compares to the rest of this division, Own the East is sort of about an idea going forward. That the division belongs to Georgia, much the same way Alabama has sort of taken a stranglehold of the SEC West. So that's a little bit of the mindset around Own the East. But you're right. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, as you get closer and closer to the SEC championship, the goals completely change, and it does become about chasing that championship more so than just owning the East for right now. J.C. Howell says, how much playing time do you think Natrez Patrick gets tomorrow? I'm going to assume that it's a slow work back in for him. I think Patrick's an important player. I think he is a part of this game tomorrow, but I don't think he gets, the full complement of his playing time back just yet. I think he has to work his way probably back into that role. My guess is you still see a good bit of Monty Rice. You still see, some of the guys that provided depth there, but obviously I think Natrez is also a big part of the game as well. Sean Doyle says, any tricks up Kirby's sleeve for tomorrow? We talked about this to start the show. Maybe more blitzing if you count that. As far as trick plays go, offensively, I just don't think Georgia needs it. I don't. I mean, I think Georgia's got a good quarterback. I don't want anybody else but him throwing the ball. And I think that Georgia's running backs are so good that I don't need a lot of reverses and things like that. Now, you may have to wildcat a little bit because, that seems to help sometimes against a pretty good defensive front. This is the best that Georgia's faced since Notre Dame and probably the best that Georgia's faced all season long. Do you do that thing? Do you remember the first half of, was it the Mississippi State game? I can't remember. But I want to say that you had Chubb and Swift in the game at the same time briefly as a two-back look with Fromm from the shotgun. And, it's just a brief look, but it's like it's that fake handoff up the middle to Chubb. Defense got to respect that. Outside run with the very fast DeAndre Swift. That's That's the kind of trick play that I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of. And it's not a trick play in that it's not, a Statue of Liberty or something like that, but it's a little different look than Georgia typically provides, and it's a really, really tough thing to defend. Philip Jordan Wells says the only negative about the game is going to be Gary the Hater Danielson, not the result. Keep chopping dilly-dilly. Yeah, I don't know about Danielson. I mean, I think he's okay. He does say some weird stuff from time to time. I don't know that he's biased against George, at least in my opinion. I certainly understand where you're coming from on that. I just think he's I don't know. Just some of his opinions are just a little weird to me, I guess. It's just sort of the best way I can say that. Neil Landon Jackson says, do y'all ever come to South Georgia? We feel left out down here. So I tell you, I'd love to do some South Georgia stuff. Neil, you have to tell us which South Georgia town you're in. But let's go to Savannah one day. Let's go to Thomasville. Let's go to Albany. I mean, let's go to South Georgia here pretty soon. I'd love to do that. We'll have to sort of find the right venue, the right way to do it. But I know that Jeff Sintel would be on board for that. Absolutely. So, Neil, tell us what town you're in, and we'll see if we can figure out a way to make that happen. That's also a really good thing to do in the off season too, which we do DawgNation Daily, all year long, have now for the last 3 years. But that's one of those things that you can spend a little time and maybe build it around recruiting or something like that. That might be a fun thing to do. Blake Wilson already looking ahead. Set up a DawgNation Invasion Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge next year since I live here, and it's hard for me to make it back to Georgia for some events. We'd love to do that. We absolutely have already had some preliminary meetings about that. So obviously some of that's above my head. It's the folks who want to do the money, but yeah, listen, we'd love to do that. Hopefully we're talking about a big season for Georgia as a way to kind of keep that rolling. Somebody in the comment section asked me for a prediction on the game. For me, it's a low-scoring game. It's a Georgia win, low scoring. I don't know what the Vegas over-under total is, but I'm probably going underneath it no matter what. I think this game is about trying to limit Jarrett Stidham for Auburn, as we said to start the show. And if Georgia does that, I think it wins a game in which Kirby Smart's probably comfortable, being a little conservative here. Not having to be too aggressive early. Georgia, and he said he wants to be the hunter, not the hunted. But there is something to be said for having the advantage of maybe being the slightly better team. And so I think Georgia probably tries to utilize that on Saturday a little bit. Somebody also mentioned that our show helping them get their workday done faster. Listen, on a day like this, that's about the only service I'm trying to provide. I mean, I know what the mindset around DawgNation is right now. Y'all are ready to go. You're ready to go home from work. You're ready to go either if you're heading to Auburn or get in front of that TV, going over to a friend's house or huddling around a bar. I mean, this day around this place, DawgNation, is about just ticking the clock and just getting to 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. So if this portion of our conversation helps it go by faster, that's all I'm trying to do. I am just trying to get there just like y'all are right now because I am ready for it. Scott McFadden says, hope we grab the momentum early in this game. Need to take the air out of Jordan Hare. Oh, boy, I like that. That's a phrase that needs to be coined right there. Corey York says McCole was a quarterback in high school, waiting to see that, him from a Wildcat again. Yeah, that might be kind of interesting. Eric Moody says, checking in from the Golden Isles. You had me at hello as far as the DawgNation event there. I bet we could talk the whole staff into going and doing a show from St. Simon's or Sea Island. Maybe we'll set up right there in Southern Soul Barbecue, right there in the front there at St. Simon's. That'd be a fun way to spend a day for sure. Ken Feinberg says, will I be stopping for the free Chick-fil-A tomorrow? So I don't quite understand that. But I will say this, that, the line for these places is as long enough as it is when you have to pay for it. I can only imagine how long the line's going to be when it's free. Let me hit a couple more. We'll get ready to get out of here. William boy, all y'all live in these nice, scenic locales. William Rozier checking in, or I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, William, not Rozier or Rozier. I'm assuming it's like Mike Rozier, the former running back from Nebraska. He's checking in from Brunswick, St. Simons. I mean, I swear, in this comment section, 80% of y'all live in, Fernandina Beach or St. Simons, Brunswick. Y'all are living right, man. I'll give you credit for that. Y'all are living right. Danny Vaughn in Cordele, Georgia. There's a Marco's Pizza in Warner Robins. Yeah, we actually drove by Cordele the other day coming back from Jacksonville. And when I was a kid, Danny, the thing I always loved about Cordele was there's that rocket ship, like right there off the exit. And I used to look for that thing because we'd go to Daytona on vacation when I was a kid. And you go past Cordele, we'd stop there and eat breakfast. You see that rocket ship. It's just one of those landmarks. When you take these long drives as a kid, you're looking for anything to sort of pass the time. So I know Cordele very well. And, by the way, the home of Crisp County High School, which has not been too good to Georgia in recruiting as of late, but nonetheless, a lot of good players play there. Ray Brandon says a trip from Thomasville to Valdosta to Waycross. I'd love to do that. I love the Okefenokee Swamp, by the way. I'd check that out for sure. Melchizedek Lockwood says Kirby's got this team more disciplined. I believe that's true. Kingsland, Georgia, J.C. Howell, Camden County country down there, the really good football power. All right, so I'm late. We got to go. I got folks that help me out. They got stuff they got to do. So let me wrap up the show, but let me just say this. Thank you all for such a great week. Let's enjoy this thing tomorrow. Let's go out there and for those of you heading over to the Plains, bring it back with a win. We'll have you the Dixie Vodka post-game show from Auburn immediately after the game. Tweet us, Jeff and me, tomorrow. Let us know where you are. We're going to be walking around doing heaven knows what before the game. So we'll talk to you there. Monday morning, 10 a.m. once again, back for another episode of DawgNation Daily. Share the show. I'll give away an On the East t-shirt again on Monday. We'll draw a name and do that. Thanks for all your support of the show. Enjoy the game Saturday, and we'll see you over the weekend, then again on Monday.